She was bright, full of life, and had a smile that could light up any room. Drew Katrina Sjoden was a 22-year-old college student with dreams as vast as the sky. A senior at the University of North Dakota, she studied graphic design and had her whole future ahead of her. But on a quiet November afternoon in 2003, Drew's promising journey took a chilling and tragic turn. After finishing a shift at Victoria's Secret, Drew never made it home. A routine trip to the mall turned into the beginning of a nightmare that would grip the nation and forever change a community. The search for Drew became one of the largest in North Dakota's history. Volunteers, police, and concerned citizens joined forces hoping to bring her home. But what they uncovered instead was a horrifying truth that sparked outrage, heartbreak, and action. This is the haunting story of Drew Sjoden, a young woman whose tragic end led to powerful change and whose memory continues to echo in the fight for justice and safety. Under the wide skies of Minnesota, Drew Katrina Sjoden came into the world on September 26, 1981, in Minneapolis, but it was the small town of Pequot Lakes where her light truly began to shine. A natural leader with a magnetic spirit, Drew was crowned homecoming queen at Pequot Lakes High School, where she was as celebrated for her sharp mind as she was for her unstoppable energy on the basketball, volleyball, and golf teams. Nicknamed Doodles in childhood, Drew's presence was unmistakable. Her warmth, creativity, and kindness left an imprint on everyone she met. But Drew's brilliance wasn't confined to the classroom or the court. She had a heart wired for service. Whether she was taking underprivileged children bowling, teaching little ones to read, or rolling up her sleeves to help raise funds for causes like the American Diabetes Association, Drew gave freely and fully. Her compassion knew no bounds. After high school, she carried that same fire to the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks, where she became a proud member of the Gamma Phi Beta sorority. Life for Drew was a balancing act of dreams and determination, juggling a packed academic load while holding down 2 part-time jobs, one at Victoria's Secret in the Columbia Mall and another at a local nightclub. And still, she carved out time to lift others, dedicating herself to supporting at-risk teens. Drew Sjoden was not just a student, an athlete, or a volunteer. She was a force of love and light, remembered for the way she made everyone around her feel seen, valued, and inspired. On November 22nd, Drew Sjoden wrapped up her shift at Victoria's Secret in the Columbia Mall, Grand Forks, around 4 p.m. She loved her job. It was helping her save up for an exciting trip to Australia she had planned for the spring of 2004. After clocking out, Drew lingered for a bit, browsing through nearby stores. She had her eye on a new purse and found just the right one at Marshall Fields. The purchase was made, and she stepped out into the fading daylight and made her way across the parking lot to where her car was parked outside J.C. Penney. It was 5 p.m. That was the last time anyone saw her. Drew never showed up for her second job that evening. When she didn't arrive, concern quickly turned into fear, and a friend called the police to report her missing. Investigators spoke with Drew's boyfriend, Chris Lang, who shared a chilling detail. He said she called him just after leaving the mall, walking toward her car. The call was brief and abruptly cut off after he heard her say 2 simple, unsettling words. Okay. Okay. He didn't think much of it at the time. Her tone wasn't panicked, and he assumed the call had just dropped. But what followed was even stranger. At 7:42 p.m., he received another call from her phone. This time, there was no voice, only static, and the eerie sound of buttons being pressed. Alarmed, police combed through the Columbia Mall parking lot and soon found Drew's car exactly where she had left it. But something was wrong. Lying beside the vehicle was a knife sheath, a haunting clue that turned growing worry into grim suspicion. Authorities feared the worst. Drew Sjoden hadn't just gone missing. She had been abducted. The search for Drew Sjoden intensified as police turned to technology for answers. Investigators contacted her cell phone provider in hopes of tracking her last known location. What they learned was chilling. Drew's phone had pinged off a tower near Crookston, Minnesota, suggesting she had been taken in that direction. With no sign of her for days, hope began to fade. Then, a breakthrough. One of Drew's shoes was discovered beneath a bypass near Crookston, confirming suspicions that the area held critical clues. Fueled by this discovery, law enforcement zeroed in on Crookston and began combing through local residents, specifically those with past convictions for non-consensual offences or abductions. It wasn't long before a tip led them to a name: Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. A local man recently released from prison, Rodriguez had an alarming record: 23 years served for multiple assaults and an attempted kidnapping. He was a Level 3 registered individual, the highest risk category, and now he was back living with his mother in Crookston. Police brought him in for questioning. Rodriguez admitted that he had been in Grand Forks on the day Drew vanished. Not only that, he confirmed he'd visited the Columbia Mall, the very mall where Drew worked, but he claimed he had simply gone there to watch a movie. When pressed, he said the film was Once Upon a Time in Mexico, but detectives weren't buying it just yet. They contacted the theatre at the mall, along with every other cinema in Grand Forks. The result? Once Upon a Time in Mexico hadn't been showing anywhere in town that day. Rodriguez's alibi had just fallen apart, and police knew they were closing in on the man they believed was responsible for Drew Sciodin's disappearance. Despite mounting suspicion, Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. insisted he had nothing to do with Drew's disappearance. But when he allowed police to search his 2002 Mercury Sable, that story began to unravel. Hidden in the trunk, officers discovered a knife, one that would prove to be a key piece of evidence. Red liquid was also found smeared on the back window and staining the car's seats. Forensic testing soon confirmed what investigators feared. The red liquid belonged to Drew, and the knife. It was a perfect match for the sheath recovered beside her abandoned car in the mall parking lot. Even with this damning evidence, Drew was still missing, and Alfonso continued to deny any involvement. But that changed 5 months later. On April 17th, 2004, the grim mystery came to a tragic end. Drew's remains was discovered in a ditch near Crookston, an area that had already been searched. The harsh Minnesota winter had concealed her remains beneath layers of snow, and only after the seasonal thaw did her body surface. The sight was horrifying. She lay face down, naked from the waist down, her hands bound behind her back. Rope and fragments of a plastic grocery bag were wrapped around her neck. The autopsy revealed the full horror of what Drew had endured. She had been brutally beaten and violated, and her throat had been slashed. Experts concluded she passed away due to a combination of factors, either asphyxiation, the knife wound, or prolonged exposure to the elements. The discovery shattered any remaining doubts. Drew's fate had been sealed the moment she crossed paths with a predator, and now justice demanded its course. Because it was believed that Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. had abducted Drew in North Dakota and transported her across state lines to Minnesota before killing her, the case was brought to federal court. This opened the door for prosecutors to pursue the death penalty, a path they made clear from the outset they intended to follow. From the beginning of the trial, the prosecution laid out a harrowing sequence of events. Drew was abducted in broad daylight from the Columbia Mall parking lot, taken across state lines, brutally violated, and unalived. They argued that this was not just an abduction, it was a calculated, predatory act. The jury was presented with damning evidence: the knife discovered in Alfonso's trunk that matched the sheath found next to Drew's abandoned car, red stains confirmed to be hers, and forensic findings that included hair and fibers on Drew's remains that matched Alfonso and items found in his possession. With every detail, the prosecution painted a chilling picture of Drew's final hours and left little room for doubt about the horrors she endured and who was responsible. In a haunting testimony that brought the courtroom to a standstill, medical examiner Dr. Michael McGee described the devastating injuries Drew had suffered. He revealed that 2 deep lacerations were found on her neck, injuries he believed were the most likely cause of her passing. Yet, he explained, certainty was elusive. Given the condition of Drew's body and the time that she had passed, he couldn't definitively rule out other causes, such as suffocation or exposure to the brutal winter cold. Dr. McGee, a seasoned expert with more than 4,000 autopsies over his 26-year career, emphasized that while exact details, how, where, and when Drew passed away remained unknown, his professional opinion was grounded in experience, and that opinion was clear. Drew passed away as a result of homicidal violence, most likely during a violent, non-consensual act. The physical evidence told its own grim story. Drew had been wearing a pink sweater on the day she disappeared. It was found torn open down the front and shoved back over her shoulders, just like her peacoat. These small but powerful details painted a disturbing picture of what she endured in her final moments. In a chilling revelation before the court, Dr. Michael McGee painted a vivid picture of the brutal struggle Drew had endured before her demise. He described the multiple injuries to her body, pointing to visible signs of a violent confrontation. Specifically, he detailed 2 severe cuts to her throat. One, a 5.5-inch gash that had pierced Drew's internal neck structures, and the other, a 3.5-inch incision. He explained that the larger cut had been made using a start and stop motion, deep enough to cause substantial damage. Dr. McGee expressed his belief that these injuries were inflicted at the site where Drew's remains was found, considering the lack of red stains found in Alfonso Rodriguez's car or on Drew's clothing. This absence of red stains led him to conclude that Drew had likely been unalived in the location where her remains was ultimately discovered. The fact that she had been hidden under snow, face down, suggested that red liquid may have pooled beneath her. Further details revealed the brutal nature of her final moments. Drew's hands were bound tightly with 4mm nylon rope, and remnants of a plastic grocery bag and rope were found around her neck. Despite the rope being wrapped twice around her neck, Dr. McGee ruled out manual strangulation, though he couldn't dismiss the possibility that the plastic bag over her head had contributed to suffocation. The jury also learned that the cause of Drew's demise could have been either the fatal cuts to her throat or suffocation, both capable of leading to her passing in mere minutes. However, exposure to the freezing temperatures was considered the least likely cause, as it would have taken several hours for her to succumb to the elements. This damning testimony made it clear that Drew's demise was the result of violent, deliberate actions, and not merely the consequences of environmental exposure. Dr. Michael McGee provided critical testimony in court, firmly stating that he believed Drew had been violated before her demise. He pointed to lab results that showed a specific enzyme, typically found in the male prostate, which suggested that Drew had engaged in inappropriate contact within 24 to 36 hours of her demise. This detail weighed heavily in the prosecution's case. However, the defense sharply disagreed with the prosecution's conclusions. Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. had attempted to negotiate a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, but his offer was rejected. With the stakes high, the core issues in the trial became whether Drew had been violated and, more importantly, where she had been unalived, questions that would directly influence whether Alfonso would face the death penalty. The defense countered, arguing that there was no solid evidence to support the claim that Drew had been violated, nor could it be proven that she was unalived after being taken across state lines. They posited that Drew likely passed away due to suffocation within minutes of her abduction, casting doubt on the prosecution's timeline. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury found Alfonso guilty of kidnapping, resulting in Drew's demise in federal court. The next crucial step was determining his sentence, as the jury was tasked with deciding whether or not to recommend the death penalty. After hearing impassioned arguments from both sides, the jury deliberated and ultimately reached a unanimous decision, recommending that Alfonso be sentenced to death for his heinous crimes. For the first time in nearly a century, North Dakota saw a death sentence handed down. The state itself does not have the death penalty, but under federal law, it was an option in this case. Judge Ralph Erickson, who oversaw the trial, acknowledged the historical weight of the decision. This is the first time since 1914 that any judge has been confronted with a death penalty sentence in North Dakota or Minnesota, he stated. Despite the severity of the crime, Judge Erickson admitted that delivering the sentence was profoundly difficult for him, calling it the worst day of his judicial career. In response, Alfonso's defense attorneys immediately sought a new trial, but their request was denied. They then appealed the decision, pushing for a stay of execution until the appeal could be heard. In September 2021, a federal judge overturned the death sentence on appeal. Though Alfonso's conviction remained intact, Judge Erickson, The same judge who had sentenced Alfonso to death ruled that several key issues had been mishandled during the original trial. He cited misleading, inaccurate, and unreliable testimony regarding the cause of Drew's demise, as well as the failure of the defense to raise an insanity defense or address Alfonso's severe post-traumatic stress disorder. In his ruling, Judge Erickson stated that these errors violated Alfonso's constitutional rights. While it is beyond question that Rodriguez abducted and unalived Drew, the evidence now in the record has led the court to conclude that errors were made that violate the United States Constitution, such that due process demands a new penalty phase trial be held. Judge Erickson pointed to Dr. McGee's testimony on the non-consensual contact evidence as a critical issue in the case. He noted that the opinions McGee expressed during the trial were not included in his official autopsy report and were unsupported by any scientific literature or expert testimony. Few trials are perfect, and even fewer are so marred by errors that expert testimony is later shown to be so unreliable it would have been inadmissible, Judge Erickson stated. But these post-conviction proceedings have revealed credible evidence that obscured the truth during the original trial. As a result, he ordered a new sentencing phase to take place. The prosecution, however, disagreed strongly with the ruling. They argued that the decision to pursue the death penalty should not hinge on proving that Drew was violated. Does anyone really think the outcome would have changed if the medical examiner had simply concluded she met her demise after being tied, beaten, injured with a sharp object, and left in the weeds? They questioned. The next steps remain uncertain, with prosecutors contemplating whether to appeal the ruling or accept a life sentence. Acting North Dakota U.S. Attorney Nick Chase confirmed that his office was still weighing their options. If the appeal had been successful, Alfonso's death penalty could have been reinstated. However, when the appeal failed, the Department of Justice was faced with the decision of whether to proceed with a new sentencing phase in an effort to secure another death sentence. Ultimately, they chose not to pursue it, and Alfonso was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the time, the department's intentions were unclear, particularly as federal executions had been halted when President Biden took office due to his opposition to the death penalty. Despite this, his administration had asked the U.S. Supreme Court to reinstate the original death sentence for the surviving Boston Marathon bomber. Although Alfonso's conviction had not been overturned, he remained incarcerated at a federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana. Then, on March 14, 2023, prosecutors announced that they would no longer seek the death penalty. Subsequently, on May 18, 2023, Alfonso was officially sentenced to life without parole. Drew's tragic murder had a lasting impact on national policy. In 2006, President George Bush signed the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act into law, which included Drew's Law. The law renamed the National Registered Individual Public Registry to the Drew Sjodin National Registered Individual Public website, providing the public with access to information about registered individuals across all states, territories, and tribal jurisdictions. Drew's case also changed how Minnesota handled convicted registered individuals, leading to a significant increase in offenders being committed indefinitely to registered individual treatment programs following the completion of their prison terms. The loss of Drew Sjodin sent shockwaves through her community and the nation. Her family and friends were left to navigate unimaginable grief, holding on to memories of her warmth, her laughter, and the dreams that would never come true. In the wake of the tragedy, Drew's name became a symbol of hope and change. Her story led to the creation of the Drew Sjodin National Registered Individual Public website, a tool designed to help protect others from predators and to ensure that no other family would have to experience such heartbreak in silence. Though her life was cut short, Drew Sjodin's legacy continues to shine, a reminder that one voice, one story, can move mountains and create lasting change. If you found this video compelling, leave a like and your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to subscribe and watch our other videos.